Hey, it's Patrick Fitzmaurice, CEO of the change consultancy Caterpillar Farm, and I'm delighted to be here with my friend and colleague and partner, Gareth Hosking. Gareth, say hello.
Patrick, really awesome to be here and looking forward to this discussion we're going to have around strategic change communications. Love it.
Cool. So Gareth and I wanted to share a few things, but first a little background. So many of you know that I started Caterpillar Farm back in 2017, and we really focus on helping clients understand change, define change, and activate change and transformation within their companies and teams. Gareth and the CB4 team based in South Africa have been a critical cog in the work that we do on behalf of clients. And through that work, we've identified a gap that we think is really important for change leaders to focus on. It's a gap in communications. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit today about how we see strategic change communications coming to life and really impacting a leader's ability to drive transformational change in their team. So Gareth, are you up for sharing our method with the group?
Very, very up to it, Patrick. And joining the messaging dots is what it's all about for me, moving people along the change adoption curve. You know, it's always through a deliberate and a skillful positioning of the change within the organization and within internal and external audiences. I'm sure we'll get into it, but I just love joining the messaging dots.
As we've done a lot of work with a variety of clients over the past couple of years, and as we've explored globally the topic of change leadership and change transformation through the podcast that Gareth produces called Change Cultivators, we really wanted to kind of bring to our clients and bring to the industry a structured and disciplined process of doing change communication because it is such a gap. Many of our clients would say, hey, I've defined a change, let's go after it. And what they don't do is the hard work and the consistent work and the discipline of the work of having a strategic change communication plan to help bring their employees, bring their team, bring their organizations through a change. And it's critically important. You know, the industry literature on change and transformation from McKinsey and Company would say 70% of change comms and programs fail to achieve their goals, largely because there's some kind of employee resistance or a lack of management support. Fundamentally to us, that boils down to a change comms issue. So Gareth, I know in the work we've done with a variety of clients together, we've kind of crystallized this down into what we call a PEACE model, a PEACE, and how you think about using that model to advance a change and bring people through a change adoption curve. Do you want to comment a little bit on the power of that model, Gareth, and how we've used it to help clients through a change adoption curve?
Yeah, Patrick, I think, you mentioned the 70%. I mean, that is up for grabs, and I think there's a lot of debate even around that. But the one thing that we can say in what our experience with our clients is that, there's a lot of poor communication with change. And I mean, we've been involved in many projects, and, I've got a little bit of a soapbox about this. But each and every organization is always very meticulous about communicating to their consumers. And before we even just get into that model, for me, my little soapbox is, we all sort of exposed to the stimulus of brand communication and communication to the end consumers, and this communication is done meticulously. It's researched, it's put out in a creative way, it's put out in the most effective way to try and tap into a consumer's mindset and all of these things and change people's behavior. But when it comes to internal change or internal transformation, organizational transformation, why is it that somehow the communication mediums, the methods, and the outworkings of that, never mind the upfront piece of understanding where people are at, the context of where they're at, the relevance of what we're putting out, it somehow comes through as, listen, we'll put out an email, we'll put out a memo, we'll put out this or whatever the case is, and the majority of what gets put out is stuff to read, for people to read. And I mean, people sit in consumer meetings and say, the consumers, people don't read anymore. We need to do video. We need to do this. And so I just think a lot of what happens, and even in the context and relevance of today's time, is that there is a lot of change happening. I mean, in all the organizations, Patrick, that we are working in, we understand. I mean, some of the examples even of one of the global clients we've recently been working with is there's so much big change, transformation happening around them, that each and every project that suddenly comes on is just this additional almost burden upon people. And then this particular person in charge of this project says, we're just not getting traction. We're just not moving people through the adoption curve. And so really, that's my little soapbox, is that why is it that externally we'll communicate with consumers in a very different way to how we communicate internally to our own employees?
It's so insightful what you're saying, so I wanted to pause and dig into it a little bit deeper, because if a transformational change for your team is critically important, you can't rely on an email or one town hall meeting or just declaring it. You need to build a campaign around it to help connect people to the change, to make them desire the change and help them through the change. And so your analogy to kind of consumer marketing efforts, I would never as a consumer marketer say, hey, I'm going to tell you all of the details about this change and I'm going to tell it to you one time and I hope you buy our product, right? That doesn't work.
It's not going to work.
No. Exactly. So as we've done this work with clients, and we were really excited when we announced this earlier this year, and we pushed some things out about our partnership going a little bit deeper. And for those of you who want a little more on that, you can find a video on it on CaterpillarFarm.com. You can also make sure that you kind of look at the new area on CaterpillarFarm.com that really breaks apart what Gareth's going to talk about in terms of our methodology and process. But as we've done this work and we've migrated of taking our change consultancy into a strategic change communications practice area, this notion of declaring the purpose of the change, engaging people, aligning, creating, and execute, that's the piece, P-E-A-C-E, purpose, engage, align, create, and execute. Break those down a little bit for the listeners, Gareth, and tell them why it's so important to think structurally about the change communication in order to not just declare it, but to help people get drawn into it, help them desire it, and help them to ultimately act and believe on it.
Yeah. I mean, once again, we didn't just come up with an acronym and then build something behind it. Really, we sat and thought around why do people resist change? Why by nature, sort of commonly known and held belief amongst most people, is that people resist change. Well, there's the fear of the unknown, there's the loss of control, there's the new ways of doing things, and all of these things that go with change. And so there's this resistance to change that obviously brings about almost like a state of chaos and a state of disruption. And, people speak about disruptive change, etc. Suddenly, your whole industry might be changing and everyone gets very unsettled. Throughout generations, there's been change. We aren't still sitting in the Stone Age. And I mean, I just take hats as a description. In the early 1900s, men used to wear hats. Where have all the hats gone? While some may still wear hats, where have the majority of them gone? Well, with the advent of the vehicle, there became no more headspace to wear a hat. And so there's a simple context of where we are and that each generation goes through this change. So for us, this peace process is really about bringing a structured framework that can help people come to a state of accepting change as just part of the norm. And really, as we start out, we say the purpose, what is the purpose, building in a common purpose of the change, and really being able to build our communication strategy around that purpose, to say exactly what is it we're trying to achieve. Well, we're trying to do this or that, and then we clearly understand. And, reviewing prior efforts, why might change have succeeded? Or maybe it didn't, and the context that we're operating in is so important. The context of our industry, the context of how we are situated against competitors, the context of understanding people within the organization. And so really defining this purpose. Then we go into engaging with relevant stakeholders to really understand these ideas, going into discovery sessions internally, sometimes externally, and finalizing these ideas of what we're trying to achieve, the frameworks we need to operate within, and the objectives and the outcomes that we actually are looking for from not only the change, but actually the communication that's going to go around the change. Because often the change is defined well, but the communication to move people along the adoption curve is not always defined as well. As we said, maybe, the CEO is tasked at sending a mail out, and maybe if the CEO sends a mail out, everyone's going to sit up. But I think we've been in that situation as well, Patrick, and maybe you can input. But I mean, where sometimes people have been thought, oh, they will definitely move people, but they just haven't, and people haven't responded to it. So really, it is about engaging these relevant stakeholders and even the influencers within the organization. And then aligning this comms to relevant audiences, because once again, sometimes within the change communication, often there's just this blanket communication that is sent out. But different audiences, different departments, different role players, understand and are in different contexts. So it's once again very important that people understand, when aligning to the relevant audiences, that we start defining and we've got our little model of defining our audiences, defining the proposition we want to actually put out around the change, and then defining the key messages and the messaging hierarchy of how that actually gets rolled out. And really getting everyone onto the same page around this, so that everyone is telling the same story. I mean, Patrick, we've produced guides, we've produced, step by step how everyone should be speaking about the story that we are actually selling around the change. And it really has helped move people along the adoption curve when everyone starts speaking the same thing. Then people start hearing it from all different angles, and people start saying, well, we all seem to be speaking the same thing. So really this aligning to the messaging hierarchy and the relevant audiences is critical. And then it's about, for me, as I said, about creating this relevant communication collateral and delivering via effective methods to the various audiences. And this is where I often say, actually, we should be communicating with our internal employees and the people involved in the change in a much more visual way as well. People have to visualize change. How do you visualize change unless we can actually deliver stuff? That's what happens with consumer marketing. The consumer can visualize themselves in this brand new car or in this particular lifestyle. Often with change, people say, oh, this is where we need to get to. Here's a 300-page charter document. Get excited about it, people. How can you? You need to visualize it. And I mean, Patrick, in some of our recent projects, we've been using live creative visualization of the meetings that are actually going on and the discovery sessions. And it's helping us bring this down even into like a visual application where people can start understanding. From a young age, we read storybooks. These days, everyone watches videos. Why is it change communication is about, just words and text in all these huge documents? No wonder people don't get excited about change. So I think this creative outworking in terms of the collateral has to be considered, and then obviously executing on the strategy, having a team that is really going to roll this out, that is on it, that is adaptive, that is agile, that if things aren't working we can adjust. Because as I say, even within this, often the change communications get set and that's it. We have no plan B of if this communication isn't working. I mean, we have weekly meetings with some of our clients, as you know, Patrick, and really it's about keeping each other in the loop. This is working, this isn't working. I mean, we have some really cool open relationships with our clients. We have pulse surveys, we have online input forms where people can actually feedback, and we start gauging how the whole strategic communications plan is rolling out. So executing on this and monitoring these particular KPIs around the behavior that we're trying to achieve is vital. And so all of that put together, and it might sound like a lot, but I mean, if you put it together in a very simplified framework, it really does help focus, and it brings a peace in this disruptive change environment, and so that really is how we run it, as you know, and I think that we've been having great success around that, Patrick, when we apply it with our clients. So I think it really has worked, and it brings great stability, and it moves people along the adoption curve.
Yeah, what I love about the impact that we're able to help our clients create on this comes down to the promise of what Caterpillar Farm offers our clients, which is you have defined some kind of change that needs to happen with your team or your organization, full stop. That's awesome. And we do a lot of work on the consulting side of our business to help clients define that. That's really cool. The advent of the strategic change communications practice area, which anchors in this peace model, address this critical gap that says you've defined a really compelling change, but you're doing a horrible job, if I can be candid, driving people through the change. So as I hear you kind of, your passion for helping kind of do strategic comms around change, I love what you said. Are you really clear, once you have defined this, can you communicate the purpose of the change? Not do you know the purpose of the change. The work that you've done to define it is really important, but can you communicate the purpose of the change? Yeah. Can you engage the different audiences and stakeholders that are critically important to bring through a change adoption curve? Are you aligning your change comms, your methods and your mediums and your messages in a way that's going to bring each group of stakeholders through it? Are you creating compelling pieces of communication in different formats and not relying on just the written word, but all types of engaging media to be able to connect with them? And are you executing that per a thoughtful plan and measuring your success and adapting, right? So the notion of purpose, engage, align, create, and execute, including measure, is critically important to make sure that you're accomplishing the transformational work that you've defined when you've done it. And so I love your passion around it because it's critically important. I've seen it in our clients, right? One example that you might want to build on, Gareth, I know we're working with a regional bank at the moment, and we're really helping them drive cultural change. And we've really helped them pause and say, I know you've defined what this is, but you haven't been bringing the bank employees through it, everyone from top to bottom. Have you really been thinking through what comms messages would be important to bring different audiences through the bank? And it's critically important to kind of do the diligence. And again, I love your analogy back to consumer marketing. No consumer marketer would ever go to market with a message that wasn't thoughtfully crafted to appeal to a particular target segment, etc. So our peace model to strategic change communication is just instilling some discipline on change comms messages to bring an organization, whatever size it is, through a change that you've already defined.
Yeah, and what is it with consumer marketing? Suddenly you get this segment of consumers who all believe in your brand. And I mean, then they start being involved in social, they start, this network, this community starts growing around your brand, etc. But I mean, that exact thing has to happen internally, where people buy into it, people visualize it. It's about empowering this employee involvement and creating this team alignment. It's not going to just happen. Instinctively, I think it was Simon Sinek who said that people aren't scared of change, they just don't want to change. I mean, that's exactly it. People intrinsically just don't want to change. And so really it's about creating this team alignment and bringing people to a place where they believe they need to change.
It's so good. So I'll leave listeners with this, Gareth, and you can kind of close off as well. If you're a leader who's leading a team through some change, if you've defined the change that you really want, but you feel like you're stuck and you're not actually bringing your team members through that change, our strategic change communication practice can help you. We can help you quickly and rapidly apply the peace model to understanding what comms are needed and then creating and executing those and measuring those as we deploy them to really drive your team through a process of understanding, desiring, and adopting the change that you want them to have. It is a critical gap in change transformation leadership, and one that we think our peace model to strategic change communications helps every company, regardless of size, solve.
Yeah, Patrick, I think often what leaders take for granted is people do find change very disruptive and chaotic. And I think with this model, it really can bring, it's a simple framework to really bring a peace within the organization that people have a purpose, they understand this purpose of change, it's been engaged, people have been engaged, it's been aligned, the messaging is clear, and the pieces that help people to visualize this change, and ultimately it's executed in a very agile and adaptable manner. So yeah, I think it's good for any leader to tap into this really effective framework.
Perfect. Well, thanks for listening to Gareth and I share our excitement with this strategic change communication practice area that we've launched within Caterpillar Farm. If you want to find out more, go to caterpillarfarm.com and look under our strategic change communication area. You'll get more details on what we just talked about. If you'd like to talk to us about it, feel free to reach out and we will happily set up a conversation with you on that. And I'd encourage you all to kind of continue listening to us on changecultivators.com as we explore great change leadership around the globe with great leaders. And oftentimes we end up talking about the implications and the problems of not having a change communication plan to support change transformation efforts. So reach out. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to hear your opinions. We'd love to think if we can help you with our process. Thank you so much. Hey, it's Patrick Fitzmaurice, CEO of the change consultancy firm Caterpillar Farm, and I want to talk to you about something really important in the genre of being a change leader, and that is strategic change communications. And I'm delighted to have my friend and colleague and partner, Gareth Hosking from South Africa, the company CB4, on this conversation with me as we talk about the importance of strategic change communication as a driver of change leadership.
Hey, Gareth Hosking here from CB4. Really excited to be sharing together with Patrick Fitzmaurice from Caterpillar Farm around strategic change communication. I hope you take a listen. We've got some really cool nuggets for you to take away.